I'm Kendra Ruczak. I'm here at View Conference 2023 with Joaquim Dos Santos, director of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Really excited to talk about the film. It's just absolutely beautiful. There's so much to it.
That's awesome.
Can you tell me a little bit how you first started to approach this project with so many different visual layers, such a complex story? When did you first dive in?
I mean, so I came in at the tail end of the first film when it was still sort of in the final phases of lighting and in post-production. And Phil and Chris had screened it for me. We were in a small little screening room, and you know, at that point, I think the trailer had already released, so the animation industry was like aware that this was coming down the line. They just didn't know how hard the film was going to push. Mm-hmm. And I watched the film, and I was blown away by it. And they turned to me and they said, all right, so like, how do we go bigger, essentially? Like, their specific words were like, how do we take the governor off now and like really, really go at it? And I was like, guys, I think you did it. Like, I don't know what to I don't know where it goes from here. You know, especially that collider fight at the end. I was like, I don't know what to do. But I think with anything, you start with like a really simple idea. So there were two things. The first film was about, you know, these characters sort of invading Miles's world and invading his space and sort of like imposing themselves on him. The second film was really about Miles and Gwen sort of going out and doing the opposite and sort of imposing themselves on these other worlds. Oh, yeah. So by nature, that was already sort of a bigger idea. And then the idea, you know, that's sort of a big, fantastical, supernatural idea. But the other idea is that, you know, we've all felt a version of insecurity of feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you're trying to figure out your way into the world. I can remember being of a certain age and sort of making that separation from my parents. Mm-hmm. My kid's 8 years old. I was holding his hand. This was like just a few months ago. And his friends came up and he pulled his hand away and he didn't want me to hold his hand anymore. So those things, you know, Kemp, one of my fellow directors, both Kemp and Justin have kids that are like Miles's age. And they were going through a lot of what Miles was dealing with his parents. Mm-hmm. So that relatability, those ideas sort of transposed on top of those big supernatural ideas, that is really the kind of ignition point for how these films get thought of.
I love that. So it's really about the human side of things, the emotions.
It is. I mean, if even if you stripped away this Spider-Man motif, and there's still compelling drama that's playing out between Miles and his parents and Miles and Gwen, and I sort of joke about it, but like I really wouldn't mind seeing just a Miles day-to-day life film that doesn't even deal with him being a spider person.
I would love to see that too.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many things to explore in the universe. Wow. Were there any parts of the film, any sequences that really stood out to you in terms of being extra exciting to work on, extra complicated?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was really near and dear to my heart, to all our hearts, was this idea that, oftentimes when an animated film is made, and then after the film comes out, they release these art of books, right? Mm-hmm. And so you look at the art in there, and this is across live action and animation. Yeah. And then you look at the final product and you say like, man, this art was so inspiring and had such a spontaneity to it, or you could really feel the hand of the artist. It was sort of our mission to make sure that the art was like one-to-one represented on screen.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that idea was really, really exciting. And I think one of the places that it came across really well was in Spider-Man 2099's world. And we were paying direct homage to amazing concept artists like Sid Mead and Ron Cobb, and seeing sort of the pencil strokes first, and then the marker comps, and then the more fleshed out line work sort of build up as things dipped off into perspective. As just like a fan of art, that was really, really exciting to do.
Wow, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
I know what you mean about those books. It's really great to be able to see the art and to know that you really wanted that to actually be represented in the film.
Actually see it. One-to-one. We didn't want to pull any punches. We didn't want anybody to feel like, we had shortchanged them on that promise. That was the goal.
Wow. So how did you accomplish that? How did you communicate with your artists, with your animation visual effects teams to make that happen?
I mean, it's a huge orchestra, right? Mm-hmm. So you have artists and leads that you put absolute trust in. We have, as directors, we have the advantage of being able to like sort of go into a room and talk about the emotionality of a scene, or bringing in sort of reference images and saying like, we'd really like something that evokes this feeling. Then we have a slew of amazing artists that will get to work on that, and then the handoff between, Sony Animation and Sony Pictures Imageworks, they're technically like two sort of separate entities, but we really work as one unit. And that shorthand, they've worked on so many films together, going back to like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I think that handoff is like, it's like speaking a language without words, They have a way of interpreting like our emotionality and our lack of like technical know-how into what tools will need to get built in order to achieve the things that we're asking. And for every world, and in Gwen's world in particular, almost for every scene, those scenes were built uniquely. Yeah. Gwen's world doesn't obey one light source that sort of carried throughout all the scenes. So you have new setups for all those scenes. They were just willing to go into battle for those ideas every single time.
Oh, that's wonderful, and it really shows in the film.
Right on.
Excellent.
Awesome.
I'd love to go back to the beginning of your career.
Yeah.
How did you really launch your path to going on to direct a huge animated feature like this?
I was sort of the world's worst student in the world. I don't recommend this path, but I didn't, I was, much like Miles, I was sort of, graduated high school with a bunch of my friends, and a lot of them started going off to college. And I, from a very young age, knew I wanted to do something artistic. I grew up in LA, so my high school was right down the street from Film Roman, where they were making The Simpsons. I'd walk home from school and literally watch the animators like designing The Simpsons right there.
So cool.
So I was really lucky in that it was around me. And so I could see it. It felt tangible, but breaking that barrier and just getting in seemed almost insurmountable. But the luck of growing up in the area is that all the people that worked at those studios at night basically got together and said, hey, we need to teach like a new generation of artists. It's unaccredited, but it taught you from the people that were making the films during the day.
Oh, wow.
They got together and they formed like a little technical school.
Oh.
And I was literally slinging coffee at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and at night going and taking these courses at this school. And I found storyboarding. I loved comic books. I loved animation. I loved film. And when I took my first storyboarding class, I realized like, oh my gosh, I think this is sort of like a combination of all these things.
Right,
you're telling a story, you're speaking through a camera lens, you're really setting a pace. And my teacher at the time, he said to the class, he said like, hey, secretly, what you don't realize that the story artist is kind of the director at the top.
Oh.
Like you're really dictating a pace that the director will then internalize and make decisions on, but you really get to set a pace. And that seemed exciting. So my path was story artist. That was sort of a direct shot to directing to producing, and then on to directing a feature film.
Oh, wow. It's amazing that you were able to have that opportunity you found those teachers early on. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you have a passion for something and you really, because I was one of those kids that my mom thought like, is there something wrong with you? Because you're in your room all day drawing. And I wouldn't go outside. I wouldn't, if you really have a passion for something, like you will find a way to make it part of your life. Even if it's just a hobby, I mean, if I'm not drawing for work, I'm drawing because I enjoy drawing.
That's so great to hear.
Yeah.
And what advice do you wish you had known when you first started out?
To appreciate the process. I think not to worry so much about what's around the corner, but to really like appreciate and do the very best at what's right in front of you. When you're younger, you're always thinking about, all right, what's my next move? What's going to be the next thing that's going to get me to the thing? And I think what I realized, and I was fortunate enough to realize really soon, is that it's the work that's directly in front of you that's going to speak on your behalf and get you to the next thing.
That's great advice.
Right on.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my
really
pleasure.
Appreciate it. It's so great to chat with you.
As well.
Well, thank you so much. And make sure you check out the rest of our content from View Conference 2023.